Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod and Roku TV's World Edition, and I greet you live from the All-America city of Morrisville in North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And on this show, we talk about global affairs, increasing turbulence and division in our world, rising gas prices, inflation, a war in Ukraine, which we do have the Sasha Star show at 11, and just turbulence all over. But today I want to begin my monologue with just updating you on some basic events as we wrap up the week. And we welcome you to this wonderful show. It's an honor to host this for all of you. Yesterday, the Senate passed a bill to prevent a potentially devastating railroad strike. What we know is the bill is now going to the president for signature, and it is expected to be signed. This will basically force a deal between railroad companies and unions to avoid a December 9th strike. The biggest pay increase railroad workers have seen in decades will occur, about 24%, but there's no paid sick days, the issue worker cared most about, and President Biden was pushing for that. A strike would have had really negative ramifications on the economy, supply chain, the distribution of food, transportation, all of the above. But we will talk about this as well. A court shut down the special master's review of the Mar-a-Lago documents. Former President Trump is being investigated for mishandling government information, and the FBI seized thousands of documents from his Florida home. All of this taking place while he's made it very clear, as he did announce a few weeks ago, that he's running for the president, and polls actually have him leading in a race, in a crowded primary, to be the Republican nominee. And many people are saying that he is the front runner and will be most likely on the ballot again in 2024. The Supreme Court will weigh in on student loan relief, Biden's plan, and they expect to look at those in February. We're going to talk about other issues, but I want to go ahead and get the show started. We now welcome the other guests, Shaquille Latimer from Down Under, Chris Greco, our foreign policy analysis, Lee Newton Rhodes, and others who may be joining in momentarily. So let's go quickly before, Chris, I know you have some things to share with us, but let's talk about the railroad strike and the deal that's been signed, and whether we think this is a good thing or not.
All right, so let's talk about the Commerce Clause, which Biden went into and the legislation went into, and that's pretty important. I think the congressional clause says that the Commerce Clause says that you can justify exercising legislative power over the activities of states and their citizens, leading to significant and ongoing controversy regarding the balance of power. So here basically is what happened in 1824. Gibbons versus Ogden, right? Supreme Court held that intrastate activity could be regulated under the Commerce Clause, because the Commerce Clause was originally Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So basically what that does is, because of this 1824 Supreme Court decision, basically says you can regulate. In 1950, Swift and Company versus the United States, Supreme Court held that Congress had the authority to regulate local commerce as long as activity could become part of a continuous current of commerce. So basically what they did was they used that and they said, okay, this commerce is going to, now I don't agree with this at all. I think the government needs to get the hell out of this. But basically, Biden has misrepresented himself with the American people, with the labor unions, and with everyone involved. He lied twice this week. The first one was when he did this Commerce Clause. He basically lied to the unions and said, I'm a union guy. And something, it's funny. Not one person has
politicians lie?
Yes, he lied there, and he lied when he said, and I quote, when I wrote the legislation, the IRA legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, he stated that in front of the press, and the press didn't question him at all on that. He never wrote that legislation. What he did, the legislature wrote that legislation. Is he the writer of the legislation now? This guy is out to lunch. And let me tell you, the unions are going to let him go because he's a Democrat. And they're going to let him slide on this because he's a Democrat. And you know something? Sooner or later, people are going to have to wake up and get to
playing
this.
devil's advocate, what if he didn't do anything and the Congress didn't do anything? It could have devastating economic circumstances. We're
I'll
already
tell
in
you
a
what would have
bind.
happened. You're right, Steve. What would have happened is, yes, there may have been, but I'll tell you something. Union and management had to get that straightened out, not the government. If the government's going to interfere in that, what prevents them from interfering with anything that they perceive as being commerce? Look, I'll tell you what, bus drivers strike in Chicago. Hey, that's local commerce. That, look at the money lost on that. Look at the situation lost on that. Up, government's got to get involved on that. Boom, they get involved. Let's talk about bus driver strikes and schools. Oh my God, there's commerce aspects there. You're taking kids to school, education aspect. Boom, you got to do that. This thing could just it could slide. You have that slippery slope of government involvement in private affairs. And I'll tell you, this is the first of many aspects that are going to do this. Now, I'll tell you what happened the last time this happened was, and I told you about this. Truman got up in front of joint session of Congress, and he said everyone's going to be drafted. You want to play this game, railroads? We're going to draft every one of you guys. If you're on strike, guess what? You're getting drafted. All of a sudden, railroad strike over. I mean, it seems like the Democrats seem to have this punitive action thing going on where they sit there and they say, oh, we can't get it solved. Let's see. Hey, we'll get the federal government involved.
Hey, Chris, Chris, question
Yes,
for you.
I'm getting a little bit passionate because I get pissed about this.
You're very passionate. I love you.
Hey, let Chris go. Don't interrupt him. I want someone else to go on a rant.
Let me tell you why.
We love the rant.
Not
why
sorry.
Chris is wrong. Just
hold a second, Nick. I know you're wrong, and I know he's wrong.
Let me tell you why Chris is wrong. First of all, as you notice in some of his now videos, he speaks Italian. Okay. Now, Chris may not know that, but I translated him to talking Italian now. So Chris.
So it isn't French.
Well, I was thinking about French, but then I didn't want to upset you that much. I want to start with Italian.
I got some stuff about French.
Number two,
Yes.
big companies exercise basically antitrust control over the railroads. It's not like, oh boy, we got a lot of choices here. We don't. And that's the reason big government needs to slap them around. I believe they didn't slap them hard enough. They should have given 7 days paid vacation. I put a poll on LinkedIn with all my conservative friends. 80-20 says 7 days paid vacation. Why is it America beats the trash out of our workers when guys like Shaquille, who lollygag in Australia, or your French friends all get 30 days paid vacation, and we can't give them but 1 day? I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous.
The government does. The federal government gives sick leave and regular leave.
Listen, my conservative friends. It would cost them a whopping $321 million. You know what that means? They can't buy a huge, big mansion in Naples. Let me get the violins out for those
Florida or Naples, Italy?
Sucking people. I mean,
let me jump in here.
Go look at the Wall Street Journal mansion section, and this is the people that are sucking the blood out of the American public.
Shaquille, before you jump in, Shaquille,
I've got to have the first.
Okay, now we can listen to the blood sucking.
You're like in the debate.
Shaquille, before you jump in,
Mark,
I'm sorry.
if
you're
mentioned by your opposition on the debate stage, you get the first right of reply. I'm going to take my point of privilege right here. I'm just going to say a couple things. Firstly, in Australia, yes, you get 4 weeks of paid holiday pay if you're full time, unless you work for the government. So people like my mother get 6 or 7 weeks of paid holidays, right? Which for some reason we often will spend in America. Goodness knows why. But secondly, I just want to say, doesn't politics make for some strange bedfellows? You call Chris a conservative. I don't know why I get labelled a Republican, but okay, I'll take the title for the moment. Sasha's backstage. He's normally the one that calls me that. And here you've got Chris, and I happen to agree with him, that the government have unfairly crushed the unions. So here we have, all of a sudden, Republicans and conservatives standing up for the unions, right, while the Democrats, who are the party of the unions, seek to crush the unions using the big power of federal government. And we have Steve Rao, a Democrat, that comes in and says, well, what if the government didn't intervene? or maybe Steve and to other Democrats, maybe the government shouldn't have intervened in the first place by pumping all this money into the market. So in the meantime, we're now in a position where Republicans are defending the unions and the Democrats are trying to crush them. Brilliant. Good on you, America. Well done.
Shaquille, I want to bring in one of our other good friends, Lee Newton Rhodes, because I was having a conversation with a couple of friends yesterday and all of that. And it comes down to how much of Lee's favorite phrase, personal choice, are we willing to accept and all in that space? Because definitely I'm been a fan and have been a fan for a long time around the power of unions. I don't know that they have as much power as they used to have, and that there are some unions that are still out there fighting for things that to me make reasonable sense. Now, Shaquille, I understand from an economic standpoint why there might be issues with $15 or $20, but I do think that the ridiculous low wages that we have to be improved some kind of way, because
why not?
There's no way that you can survive on that minimum wage and everything.
Why not pay everybody $50? Why not pay everybody $50 an hour?
Well, like I said, I don't know what the set amount would be.
The tech industry.
Here's the thing. The free market does a really good job of this. The government does it. The free market does a really good job of when they have employees, the employees say, look, we want better conditions, we want higher pay. And the free market says, no, I'm not paying you that. And then the workers say, well, we're going to go on strike and we're going to shut down your company. And the free market says, well, we're going to sack you all and we're going to employ other people. And unless you've got things like an open border, you know what happens? They can't find employees. And so the wages go up anyway, supply and demand. But you want to have high wages. You don't want to pay high prices for consumers.
See, he still believes in the myth of the free
market. You want to buy those goods from other countries where they have lower wages, right? But you want to get paid high wages for your labor.
Shaquille?
For a long time, and I did use that phrase for a reason. $7 stupid. It needs to be raised.
Well, we have to distinguish.
Go ahead.
We have to distinguish when there's a free market and when there's not a free market. If there's competition or not. When the government's involved, there is no free market. There's a monopoly. The government does what it wants.
But
here's the question, Mark. Let me ask you this question. If you are such
because it may answer your question what I'm going to ask you.
Well, you don't know what I'm going to ask it. I guarantee you don't know what I'm going to ask. If you are such a supporter of the unions, right? And as Mr. Trust Fund Baby over there obviously loves the unions until the Democrats don't support the unions, then all of a sudden he's a Republican and a Democrat in name only, a dino, right? Let me ask you this question. If you believe in competition and you believe in that sort of thing, why exactly can't they have multiple unions? Why is it that there's only the Teamsters? Or there's only certain unions.
What the hell are you talking about?
Why can't we have a free market?
What are you talking about? There's like 5 or 6 teachers. What the hell is he talking about, Chris? There are multiple unions.
If you had a free market,
everything. What the hell is he talking about?
If you allowed competition in unions, I promise you, Chris and I, and even Lee, who's very conservative, we would form our own organisation, our own union. We'd take $2.25 off everybody's paycheck each week, and we'd compete with the other unions. But we're not allowed to do that because of stupid rules that were put in by the Democrats.
But see, it might come back to your question.
Democrats are wonderful.
It doesn't matter.
There are multiple variations of kids.
Blah, blah, blah. And it's all of the
I don't think that they're multiple Democrats. But I will say, and this is I like point, and Nick's point, I have another thing that I have a problem with, and I've brought this up on other shows as well, is that there are too many things out there that have been severely monopolized, and they don't even have the fact that they are monopolies. Like, you want to take the media world, and that's a world that I know very well and everything. There's basically 3 or 4 existing power brokers, and if you're not part of those companies, you're not considered a major media player.
Hey, Mark,
Clear Channel, Live Nation, and a lot of times they own the artists, they own the venue, they own just about every aspect of the distribution chain. So that's a monopoly.
Maybe that's because you allowed the government to auction broadcasting rights.
Let me talk about how they set up organized crime where they set up little, to show that, everything links. Did you know that ABC and Disney, right, ABC is the parent company of Disney, right?
Right.
Do you know do you know the channel that Disney owns? I never knew this till like the other day. The news channel that Disney owns. Which news channel does Disney own?
CNN.
Fox.
They own
Fox. It owns Fox.
No,
Yes.
no,
yeah. Take a
no.
look. I took a
Okay,
look.
Data Man, you're gonna have to put up or shut up on that one. We
Chris,
thought
I'm sorry, you're wrong. I'm sorry, you're incorrect.
Done by the Australian Murdoch. Come on, you got to
work
on
out.
that.
Fox.
Well, he's gonna find
split off.
the
Hang on.
information.
Let me just respond to Chris. What actually happened was that
Let's
Fox
talk to
split
Murdoch's
off.
brother.
Fox split off, and what they did was they sold Fox, as in Fox Studios, and their movie rights and all that sort of stuff. They sold that to Disney. Fox News itself comes under Fox Corporation, of which I will announce I am a shareholder of. Yes, you wouldn't believe it, would you? Yes. No, Fox is not owned by the Fox News is not owned by Disney. That's
20th Century Fox is owned by Disney.
Yes.
20th see, you say Fox to me, and automatically it goes to Fox News channels.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, and this comes out to Nick and our own lovely network and the personal responsibility that we've talked about and everything. We've had 2 guests on some of our shows, including one that was on yesterday, that y'all will be glad to know have had that lifestyle of the not rich and famous like Shaquille, but the lifestyles of the mafia life, and they have now reformed their life and are taking that mafia life into the business world because they have said, hey, why am I going to risk the possibility of whatever?
I don't like the word mafia. Mafia, you're bringing a tiny book. It's not mafia, it's organized crime. Now we'll say organized crime. Mafia is business.
In prison.
You can't say mafia.
I feel like
organized crime.
You have jumped to cultural
Washington, Chris.
As soon as Nick says that Chris Greco is being translated into Italian, and then Chris Greco starts talking about cartels, you all of a sudden start thinking of the mafia and thinking that, well, obviously Chris would understand the inner workings of the La Costa.
It's a culture. Who's playing that? You bastards.
I promise you,
Chris, be quiet. We know
10
you're
years
with the mafia. We weren't supposed to be announcing this on the air. Stop it. The bosses called me. They told me we were not supposed to announce it on the air.
President Biden, I promise you, President
Biden.
The railroad strike right now, Chris.
I just swore. I said the F word on the air. Let's see what happens with that one.
I have dropped it. I have accidentally dropped it a couple of times myself.
Hey! Crystal Fredo of the Democratic Party.
No one cares.
But seriously, getting back to serious topics, Steve, and I heard the monologue and everything. Do the unions actually really exist? Do the unions really have power? And do the unions have any future in the 21st century? I'm actually seriously wondering that, because I know that people have been having union conversations.
In North Carolina, we're a right-to-work state. So the unions don't really have as much power as they did in North Carolina.
It's kind of sad in a way. I mean, as a Republican,
coal miner unions too.
Steve, I agree with you. I think the teachers here need to have a union. I mean, I feel bad for them. I mean, I know teachers personally, and let me tell you something. They're being used and abused here in North Carolina. I feel so bad for them. I mean, they basically are at the state legislature.
But you know what? If you don't like it, go get another job. Sorry, but if you don't like being in the Air Force,
part of the Outback are you from?
Else calls you the Chair Force, go get a job as a Marine, right?
That is true. I mean, you have a good point.
This is what happened during the Civil War.
But just feel bad for the good teacher.
Predating the Air Force.
Why, Chris?
This is what happened in the Civil War.
Because they're
where that dude, I forget his name, decided that they should start using hot air balloons, and they could go up so high where they wouldn't get shot. Right, and they could see when the opposition was coming towards them, and so they actually managed to convince Abraham Lincoln to do it. And the U.S. used to have the U.S. Balloon Force. Now, if I was told that I had to be in the U.S. military, that's what I would join. Why isn't there a balloon force anymore? That's what I want to be in.
The first people who did that were the French. So I just want to let that.
Well,
I mean, they've done some
right,
good things.
right.
You know,
And
let's
also,
go to the second because that now gives me my little segue to having a crack at Steve. So, Steve, as Chris said, the inspiration for the U.S. balloon force came from the French, because when America wanted its independence, when the People's Republic of New England wanted their independence from England, right? What you did was you actually got all this help from foreign nations like France, and then you turned on them years later. So let me just ask you, Steve, if you are so against the South seceding, can I ask you what the justification is for the United States seceding? Shouldn't good old Mother England and all the allies of the Commonwealth come in, overpower the US government, and turn you back into a Commonwealth country?
They did treat them as traitors. They treated them as traitors. They were traitors.
Yeah, your country did that.
They hung some of them.
Wait a minute. There are rumors going around that we may have secession. Who knows, by 2025 or whatever. But are we saying that we're okay if, let's say, part of Florida, because that's where the Black Hebrews are, or if the entirety of Florida, or even North Carolina wants to secede? Well, I guess technically we did from South Carolina and all of that. But let's just leave Texas. If Texas wants to leave or California wants to leave, then we're ready for the divided United States, because that has been a conversation that might be happening sooner versus later.
Well,
so are we ready for states to start seceding?
I think it's got a ring about it. The DSA, the Divided States of America. I think it's got a ring about it. And I've got another question I'm going to put to Steve.
Yeah.
Hey, dude, can we have a trademark on that?
If you don't think that a state,
we're going to France's visit, we're
no
going
problem.
Yeah.
Let me just, because you didn't even answer my other question, you just pretended that you didn't hear it. So I'll ask you a different one. If you don't believe that a state has the right to voluntarily leave the union, do 49 states combined have the right to kick a state out of the union? Do 49 states have the right to say, you know what, you guys in that state are mad, you're out of here, baby? Because the whole idea is you couldn't leave the union. Like, you can actually leave, but you need the consent of all the other 49 states. So 49 states say, you're leaving, we want you out of here, and your state doesn't agree with that. Does the country, from a federal position, in the Constitution, whatever you want to go with, do they have the right to kick a state out?
If they do an amendment, if they do a constitutional amendment,
what's wrong with that?
which would allow secession or whatever else, but then you'd have to have, what is that?
No, I'm not asking about secession.
Nick, what is that? 2/3?
I'm asking, could the country decide voluntarily to kick one of the states out if the rest of the country didn't like that? And what's the legal basis for them not being able to do that?
Yeah, well, because what would be the difference between that and parts of, if I understand the history, and you know it better than I do, I've never lived there, I have visited it once or twice, but wasn't West Virginia created because they wanted to separate itself from the original Virginia and everything?
That's
so
right. And they did.
Wouldn't that be the similar type of argument to what you killed?
They made themselves another state.
No, Mark, I've made that argument before. I don't understand how the Supreme Court can say the South is not allowed to secede because you're not allowed to secede, and then, a day later, I'm exaggerating, just straight afterwards say to West Virginia, absolutely, you can secede. But my question now is, if you guys don't want to answer the question about whether or not a state is allowed to secede, can the rest of the country kick a state out?
Again, constitutional amendment. You can make constitutional amendment on people drinking Coca-Cola. I mean, you can make, as long as you get the support of everyone involved, the 2/3. I think it's 2/3 and whatever it is. You can do an amendment on anything.
Right. But people
Chris,
just
what's the state supposed to do with the Tenth Amendment that's being ignored?
Yes,
Lee,
I know. You mean the second one?
No, you're being sarcastic. But Lee, I want to come back to Lee and something that he said before in the whole personal responsibility conversation, and it comes back to something that Shaquille said. One of the fears that I've heard people express is that if, because the argument I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, is that Roe versus Wade, part of the reason that we got Dobbs is because the Supreme Court made a decision that it shouldn't have made in the first place, and therefore they were correcting a wrong and turning it back to the states. And now the question I'm hearing from some of my friends is, what is to stop the states from then creating like a authoritarian rule that then would impose some rules that are not favorable toward whatever group, whether that's the Jews, whether that's the blacks, whether that's women, whether that's whatever. What's to stop?
Because it's covered under federal law.
What's to stop it from being a winding?
Because there's a little thing called the Constitution.
That's right.
In the 10th Amendment, the states don't have unlimited rights. Okay, the powers that are not given to the federal government belong to the states or to the people, right? The states can't just turn around like they could in Australia, by the way. The states can't just turn around and say, we don't like gingers, and so we're going to chop off the left arm of every redhead person in this state. That wouldn't be allowed. It'd be challenged.
Shaquille?
And the Constitution wouldn't allow for it, and the Supreme Court wouldn't allow for it. So
But
you
Chris,
can't
if
have
martial law was
authoritarian
imposed, and I don't want martial law to ever be imposed, but if martial law was imposed, the government could do whatever the heck it felt like doing.
Well, the military cannot do that under posse comitatus. They cannot act as a local law enforcement, state law enforcement agency. They can't do that.
The military, I said the military underneath the direction of the federal government. That's what martial law is.
Martial law is what you said. Martial law is not
military. I want to talk about.
Yeah,
I want to move to talk about.
Move away from legal arguments, please.
Mark,
we got a retainer.
Let's talk about France's visit.
Lee had a question for me.
Yeah, I just have a question. There are states and cities that are trying to do away with the Second Amendment. That this is real. Okay,
we can't do it.
They're doing like New York City. Basically, you can't get.
The Supreme Court
stepping in.
And Lee, there are people that have never owned. I mean, I have never owned a gun. I've had a sword, but I've never owned a gun. But I know people that literally have never owned a weapon in their day in their lives. But they are seeing some of the repressions and some of the things that are going on in their world, and they are going to ranges, learning to get a gun, learning to get different other things in order to defend themselves because they are afraid of what they see coming down the pike. I'll just leave it that way and everything. So definitely, I am a fan of people having the right to get a gun. I know friends of mine, including family members, that definitely own several. Like I said, I might even get one myself at some point, but definitely right now I don't, and I used to own a sword. But
just slap an insurance policy on all these gun owners. I mean,
we're going to come back to this issue. I want to
infringe, Nick. Thank you.
I want to shift the direction of the show to talk about the president's first state visit from France in the White House. Macron and him talking about a lot of bilateral agreements.
Oh, yeah.
During these conversations, there's been talks about maybe if Ukraine were to stop, what would the position be for both of the France and the U.S. working with Putin on perhaps a negotiation, maybe too early to say, bilateral trade agreements. Apparently, Macron's still upset about some European countries, of course, France being hurt by some of the measures in the Inflation Reduction Act, particularly climate reduction measures. What do you think about France and the U.S.? I mean, is this the beginning of a new relationship, or is it just?
Listen to Chris because he
loves. Let's talk about this for a second, just for one little second. Here's what France said. France came over and they said, Biden, with that IRA stuff, basically what happens is it sounds to us like America is doing something, for America, and then Macron goes back and says, which we do also. You do a lot. You don't do it also. You do it exclusively. Let me tell you something about the French. The French right now, they're making deals with China. They're making deals with Algeria. They're making deals with Russia. They're making deals with everybody. And they come on, and Biden shuffles alongside of Macron, and Macron boosts him up, holds his back up because basically he's going to fall forward. I mean, it's just a sad display of young and old. Biden is big. He can't even say a word. He sits down. He says, yes, we have a problem with the things. I mean, it's like, oh my God, bud, can you just look up at the audience and maybe like raise your eyebrows beyond that, what you can do? I mean, it's nuts. And then the French sit there and say, this IRA thing's going to be a problem, and we need to talk about that. But hey, even though we disagree, we're still buddies, France is we're just so happy about what we're doing here. Let me tell you something, Steve. France is going to take us down that road to freaking, why the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Shaquille, I got a question to ask you because I know that you really don't like anything French. You don't even like French fries. I'm convinced of that. You don't like French. But I do have a serious question to ask. I do have a serious question to ask Shaquille. I said it wrong. I do have a serious question to ask Chris. Hold on. But I got a question to ask Chris based on his hatred of
you just said me. You just said my name. You just said
I said it, and that was I also said it was a verbal slip. because that was the
Oh,
reference I was
fair
actually
enough.
addressing to Chris.
I'm
Chris is the one who doesn't like French fries.
I'm friends with the
So
royal
it's a
family,
verbal
Monica.
slip.
I spent a
So
lot of
I'm
time
addressing
with
the
France,
verbal
so
slip because it was a verbal slip. And coming back to Chris. So hold on. Before you respond to my verbal slip, my question to Chris was, if you don't like the French and you don't like French fries and you don't like French pastries and everything, the French is historically have had a relationship with the African American community and all in that space. And there's like this long romance between France and Harlem and the intellectual side.
Well, let me talk about that.
You're right. I want to let you respond.
You're exactly right.
You try to suggest to me, Mark.
I agree.
And you try to suggest that the French are the great defenders of African Americans and Africans in general. Is that what you
They used to kill Tunisians?
There's been
He'd go in there with a French invasion and kill
Harlem
Tunisians.
and France.
Hundreds.
Existed for decades. And part of that is around music, dance, art, and a lot of other things. There was a lot of expatriates, including some well-known ones like Josephine Baker. I want to say James Baldwin and a number of others that saw the freedom that was offered in France and their reception that they were getting from the French as opposed to what they were getting here. So there's been a long history. You can study the history between Harlem and
I agree
France.
with you. I agree with you. And that's not, I'm not taking that away from them if they have that situation.
I'll do it.
But I'm telling you, it's all about France. It's all about
France. I'll take it away from them. I've got no problems with taking that away from them. Of course they're going to do that.
French fries or anything.
Because that's what the French have always done through US history. Is try to
I don't even like French cut green beans.
States. That's like saying the French have decided on some political movement in England, and they've backed it. So don't those people in England, don't they feel so much more in love with France? No, that's exactly what the French do. And you know what happens to France in their defense is that the British sit there and they go, oh, well, we'll just interfere with your country and we'll start, forming our alliances in France. So, the idea that France is coming over to the United States with some sense of French benevolence to help the downridden and poor black community of America. I mean, you've got to be kidding me.
No, I'm just saying that
you're right, Mark. You're right to bring that up.
Mark, you know that power. I have no doubt about that as well. Because France, and we can go to Sasha's favorite place of Canada, the French definitely exploited a lot of people, just like the British exploited a lot of people in the U.S.
Mark, you do know that France extorted reparations from Haiti.
I do know that as well.
Because they released the slaves in Haiti. So what they did is they sucked Haiti dry to where right now it's still an impoverished country.
Duvalier and the rest of them.
But see, when I asked this question,
they sucked reparations out of Haiti.
I have asked this question to Mark and to other people that have come on the show in similar positions to Mark. I have said, why don't you criticize European countries who, when they ended slavery, or who had slavery in their history, why don't you criticize them about their treatment of the slaves today? And the answer is because there isn't a huge black community over there, because what they did was they sold those slaves to countries where slavery still existed, or they shipped them back to Africa, or they put them in Haiti, or they put them in Liberia, and that sort of stuff. And that point just gets ignored, and that's your justification for beating up on America.
Now, Shaquille, first off, I'm going to go back to Steve. First off, I love the way that, and Nick has brought it up several times, you are totally putting words in my mouth, because I said none of that. I've actually said that I have problems with colonialism across the board, and yes, France is part of that. Definitely England is part of that. Definitely Spain is part of that. A number of others are part of that as well. So colonialism and that exploitation is not something that I would just put on the U.S. and things of that nature. So don't go there.
Let's talk about race. Let's talk about race for a second. Hey, Shaquille, let's talk about rice.
Because I went there. All right. You have a problem with colonialism. What would you prefer? Why don't we get rid of the US government and let the Indian tribes run the place? Because you know what? Before the English got there, okay, the English aristocrats got there and violently took over the place, which they shouldn't have done. The whole landmass of the United States supported what? 2, maybe 3 million American Indians. Now there has the resources to support 350 million people, all right, plus export resources to the rest of the world. You don't like colonialism. You don't like the way the world's developed. Fair enough. Tell me what your alternative is. Tell me, if you could rewind the clock, what exactly is it that you would prefer to have seen happen?
We're going to colonize Mars.
Aspects of what exists in the world, you can make improvements and you can do what's going on. I have no problem with capitalism, contrary to what you want to believe, Shaquille. I'm involved in a capitalist venture right now and everything.
That's right.
You think that the Indian clansmen that lived in India, you think that the tribes of Africa, the American Indian tribes, you think that they would have created capitalism and they would have created a society anything like what the multicultural society is?
They would have created a barter system, and I also don't mind a barter system as well. So I think that barter can also work where there's trades and things of that nature. So there are aspects of that in society and things of that nature.
Since we're going into colonialism and we're going into British, let's talk about the British just for a second.
Because I'm being bartered all over the place right here at Pod TV.
The godmother, the queen. Not godmother, queen. The first lady in waiting was recently had to resign because she made racist remarks about an individual that she was trying to ask, "Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Where are your people from?" You know, it's interesting to me, and this is really interesting. How and Mark, I'm going to smack on you, and I'm sorry. This is one time and one time only. African Americans constantly talk about African Americans. I'll tell you something. And Steve, Indian Americans talk about Indian America. I'm from India. I'm from India. I'm from my grandfather's from India. My grandfather's from Italy. Oh, my grandfather's from Africa. You know, it goes on and on and on. But yet, when we ask, "Hey, where are your people from?" "Oh my God, you're racist." Wait a minute. If you're black and you're standing there and you're sitting there saying, "Look, I'm black, and look at me, I'm black," there's nothing you can do about that, right? So all of a sudden you ask, "Hey, where are your people from?" "Oh my God, that's racist."
No, that's
you
not
can't
racist,
do that.
Chris, two things. One, most people, because of the nature of slavery, most people from Africa that are African Americans have no idea which of the countries they came from that are from Africa. That's a known fact. That's a known situation. And part of that is the history of slavery and all along those lines. Now, the flip side of that, hold on a second. The flip side of that is that a lot of people are seeing groups that have got some sort of what they perceive to be a benefit. And I notice I said a perceived benefit because I'm not sure that it's always a benefit and everything. But do you know how many people are wandering around here claiming to be or having to claim to be some sort of Native American background and everything without having any source of knowledge of what that history involves or how that history came about, but it's just because it's hip and cool. So there's a lot of people that run around that are saying that they are Indians, including some Indians that probably ain't Indians. They probably African Americans, but they are using the title because it is a governmental constraint that can help them get money that they need. Maybe they want to open a casino. Maybe they want to get some benefits, to your point, Shaquille, because sometimes people will exploit things for that reason and everything. But I can tell you that there's at least 3 or 4 tribes that I'm aware of that are not even fully 100% sure of their own identity. And 2 of them are here in North Carolina.
I appreciate that, Mark. I do.
How would that be, Mark?
I do. That's a good answer.
If you want to go back in the history and then whinge about, white colonialism, the reality is that Indian and indigenous cultures all over the world had tribes that invaded other tribes and took over their land. I mean, this is just
that's the nature of colonialism. That's the nature of slavery.
But that's human history. And you talk about slavery. You guys are not the only ones. But I want to say 2 things here. I really resent it when anybody tries to say to me that I'm part of the Indian community. And that's why I distance myself so much on these shows and elsewhere. I don't know anything about India. I really don't. Okay. And my family, although they do speak Indian dialects like Hindi and Urdu, we are many generations away from there because we were displaced by the British. So I'm not going to be a spokesperson for Indians. I don't know why African Americans think that they can be spokespeople for the feelings and the desires and the political whims of the people in Africa. I just don't get it. But then you have this faux. Then you have I'm going to say is then you have this faux being offended at everything. If I assume that Lee or Nick have an Irish American background, okay, and they happen not to, they happen to be from Sweden, I don't see Lee or Nick or white people getting offended. Chris
not on the show.
Italian,
I probably afterwards,
right? Chris Greco is Italian.
Actually, but
we've just made fun of Chris because his show's being translated into Italian.
Chris,
you mentioned something about the mafia. I made fun of the Sicilian mafia and connected Chris to the Sicilian mafia. Chris didn't get offended and go, "Oh my God, I'm going to need to go to my
I'm
safe
turning
space.
you in.
Oh my God, I'm going to sue you. Nick, can you represent me?
I'm so offended.
First off, Shaquille, you're painting the picture totally 100% wrong.
But then all of a sudden, if you make a joke about Indians, or you make a joke about blacks, or you make a joke about the Hispanic community, all of a sudden, oh my God, how could you possibly say such a thing?
First off, you're painting the picture totally wrong. Is the reaction of most people with that and everything? Because I think that's totally a caricature of not of what is going on. First off, yes, I've seen relationships going on between people that are trying to build business alliances between folks in the various countries in Africa. I've named some of them. I can name some more if I wanted to and everything, but we'll just use Nigeria and Ghana as an example, and those in the African-American community in business here in the U.S. I don't think that's any different than somebody from France trying to form an alliance with a French-based company, and there are French-based companies here in North Carolina even, and everything. So I don't think anything different than that, than trying to form these kind of allegiances.
Mark, what do you know about Nigeria? Come on now.
What do I know about Nigeria? I have quite a few friends that are Nigerian. I have quite a few folks that are on Nigeria. We used to have a show here on the network that was Nigerian. I became friends with Brother Mike and everything.
So you got some friends who are
I don't know shit about Nigeria. You're making an assumption based on things that I've got in my life. Don't assume that I don't know shit about Nigeria or that I don't know things. I've actually got issues with Nigeria.
He does. He does.
Well, you got
okay. So you fighting, Mark. Keep fighting. Punch.
You've got some friends who are Nigerian. I've got friends that are African American, but apparently I don't understand anything about the plight of African Americans in America. But you've got a few friends that are Nigerian, so now all of a sudden, hail, Mark,
all the place, but I also do. The thing about journalists is we study, and I do study, and I do keep things in knowledge, and I'm always looking up things around the world. Chris has this great show, Worldview. It's running today instead of yesterday.
Thank you for that.
I've got friends who are Iranian, but I am not an expert on terrain like you are. I have friends that are Nigerian, but I'm not an expert on Nigeria like you are. So, yeah, all right.
But I'm just saying, but you said but I also have an issue with it.
Rice and terrain? What the hell?
The show and everything. I don't see that there's any problem with somebody that is of a descent, whatever that descent, being proud of their descent. Now, the fact that you're not proud of
you don't know you're Nigerian.
I'm just saying, but I am proud of and I like to study what's going on. If you choose to, that's your choice. If you want to live basically a white life, that's okay with me. Because you're apparently pride in your own.
You're not.
You just told me you have no pride in Indian and a number of other parts of your aspect.
Talk to my hands.
Wow.
You by your own admission have no idea, and most African Americans have no idea whereabouts they're from in Africa originally, because they were displaced by the slave traders. Like I pointed out to Steve before, India has the caste system. My family, are 10 generations away from India. So unlike Brahmin caste Hindus,
but you're Indian, buddy.
Like many of our guests, okay, we don't know where our family is actually originally from. So what should I do? So I should all of a sudden say, well, I support the people of Kerala? Or should I say, well, I look like the
you can do in the African American community can do
even though I know nothing about the culture,
basically been hijacked by a lot of folks as well, because a lot of the great things that are seen as being appealing and all of that are things that were created out of the African American community. You want to talk about one of my loves, blues? You want to talk about one of my loves, jazz? You want to even talk about hip hop? They came out of the African American community.
That is true.
A lot of the people that have hijacked it
and
are glad to enjoy it, and even sometimes not understand the culture of it. What they have got are some of the other cultures.
Well, you know the parts of whiteness that I really love, like banking and finance. I'm in it, right? You know those things that make me white weren't created by white people either. Okay. No, for example, the number system that we all use in the Western world was invented by the Arabs. For example, right? What we have. Would you prefer to use Roman numerals? You're right. What I'll say to you what I'll say, good on you, Lee.
But along the same lines, Shaquille,
What
one of the things that
what
people
I'll
always
say
talk
to
about
you-
is
what
the
I'll
things
say
that
to
are
you, Mark-
invented that aren't acknowledged. Like,
what
for
I'll say
example,
to
the
you, Sam,
microwave,
The
and the
Indians
creation
actually
of
were part of
computer
that.
chips, and a lot of other things. As a matter of fact, I think Google earlier today was showing that one of the main computer components was actually created out of the African American community. It was actually an African American man that did that, and I think that was on yesterday's Google, because Google always puts different inventions and everything.
Mark, I'm not going to take anything away from a culture, but you know what? The reality is that Western countries, especially the New World Western countries, are not white by design. They are multicultural by design. That's why I love them so much, because people from all over the world came to these countries. They developed systems of laws and justice and finance systems and contracts and all different things, a system of politics that, whilst imperfect, was created by everybody with a common goal that everybody could come to these countries and flourish. If you want to shit on that legacy, that's not you.
You said they were created. No, that's your choice. You said they were created.
Yeah, that's my choice. And
you said they were created equally, and that we are multicultural. I also love our multiculturalism as well. But I'm also understanding that there are aspects, whether it's the court system, whether it's the police system, or a number of other things, that the repression is real. And you can think that it's not real, but it is real. And sometimes it can even be real in our own cultures. Like, you don't think that colorism exists, but I do know that there are advantages that folks that are of one complexion may have than another complexion, because they can step into a role quicker than others. So you're going to tell me that there are not cases in incidences, even in the 21st century, where there are not roles that are there that the powers that be will quicker hire somebody that looks like me and can do what they used to be called passing in the day and everything, that is more acceptable than somebody that is darker complexion. If you want to tell me that doesn't exist in the 21st century and you can prove that to me, I will gladly accept it. But I think
the difference between you and me, Mark, is you say you can see where prejudice exists. I can see also where prejudice exists, and I talk about where prejudices exist. But the difference is I can also talk about what's great, and you can't. Because
I talk about what's great all the time. I love the United States. I said there several times I love the United States. I love the Statue of Liberty. I love a number of other things that are going on. I'm a sports fan. I love all kinds of things. I root for the USA. We're not playing Brazil, because I do like Brazil because of Pelé. That's a whole nother conversation and everything. But I root for the USA in the Olympics and everything else. So to say that I am not proud of the USA is also a bunch of crap.
Yeah, rubbish. I've said. Steve, you've
been trying to say something. Out, baby.
We'll give it to you and Lee.
I think we're getting towards the tail end of the show. I think
we have 5
Americans, one Australian. The Canadian
France,
is backstage.
This Mar-a-Lago agreement keeps going on. I mean, it's funny that regardless, it's not going to affect Trump's quest for the nomination. And I think that could be interesting. I have been reading that he will most likely be the nominee. I think it's going to be hard for him to beat DeSantis. He has quite a leg up with the organization on the ground. And I think if the Republicans do not want him to be the nominee, hopefully they can start talking about getting on the race. But if Pence gets in and Nikki Haley gets in and all these other people get in, then it's going to divide that non-Trump vote. And I think it's going to be hard. And I think Trump will be the nominee. And who knows whether he'll be running against
Steve. On the flip side of that, and I know it's coming back to everybody's favorite topic, but what do people think about? Because I told you I met the man, want to get him on the online dinner party. That is a goal of mine, Mr. Nick and everything. But I definitely want to get Harlem Jeffries on. But is that part of the AOC crowd and all of that? And is that going to be a good thing, or is Harlem more of a Hakeem more of a moderate? And that's it.
I think Hakeem's a moderate. He's well respected.
Is that Hakeem Jeffries? Is that a moderate that folks can work with? And
is Hakeem Jeffries a moderate? Is that your question?
I don't know.
More moderate than Nancy Pelosi, Shaquille.
Am I Chinese? What do you mean? Is Hakeem
he's much more moderate.
Oh my gosh! I'd rather deal with him than Nancy Pelosi.
That's my question. Really? I met Hakeem. Can Hakeem work across the aisles? Is that something that will be, or is he more part of the AOC camp? What I saw was somebody that had more of the Manchin kind of attitude of being a somewhat moderate and trying to go across aisles and everything. I'm just what I saw. But
the great moderate, Hakeem Jeffries, the great moderate of American politics. You cannot be serious, Mark.
Well, like you said, more moderate than Nancy. My question was,
let me ask you a question. You're a journalist. Are you trying to tell me that when you look at positions that you don't agree with from the conservative side of politics, and you look at positions that you may not agree with on the progressive side of politics, and then you look at what Hakeem Jeffries stands for, you look at him and go, you know what? Objectively, he's a moderate. He's the kind of person who's going to be able to negotiate outcomes with extremely conservative people as well as progressive people across the political spectrum. This guy is a moderate. Is that seriously what you are trying to tell us?
What I can say based on my limited observation of having met the man 2, maybe 3 times is that he did look like somebody that would be willing to go and have conversations with, say, a Ted Cruz or somebody like that. That is the impression I got from him. Would they have serious disagreements? Yes, they would have serious disagreements. And that's why I use Ted Cruz as an example. And by the way, I do know somebody in Texas that is friends with
you're a Democrat.
And everything. But I want to get away from the Australian, but I want to go away from the voice of Australia and hear from the rest of my American friends and everything. What is the thoughts around Hakeem as a person? He's from New York. So what is your thoughts as to his role in House leadership?
I don't think he's appropriate. He's an election denier. And when Trump was elected, he was out there saying Trump is, doesn't deserve to be president. It was a rigged election.
Well, he'll be speaker next year when the Democrats win the House and the Senate and the White House.
He's already been named. That's why I was asking the question.
No, he's not the speaker yet. He won't be.
I don't think he does critical thinking.
Kevin McCarthy is going to be the speaker. He's just going to be the House Democratic leader.
Yes, but eventually, the unfortunate reality is that eventually the Democrats will win the House at some point in the future, right? And when they do, more than likely, he will be the speaker. Right, he'll be third in line.
So my question is, Lee says he's a denier, and therefore, like I said, I can only go by my limited interactions with him. Hope to have him on our network, and we can all ask him these questions and everything. But whether he's an election denier or not. But Chris, Nick, what are your thoughts around him being in that leadership position, which is what I asked?
It's somebody different. Just somebody different.
I just have a question for Chris and for Shaquille. Would they prefer if they had 2 choices, Joe Biden or Hakeem Jeffries? That's all I want to know. You got a choice. Who are you going to put on your team? You can't dodge it.
Clearly Biden, because you can push him around so easily.
Biden's still celebrating Labor Day. I don't know. I don't understand what. I mean,
what year?
He's still. I mean, Hakeem Jeffries. Look, I'll tell you, Mark. I've taken a look at this guy, and he has in 2020. He basically said that the Tara Reade accusation of inappropriate contact with Biden should be investigated seriously. I wonder what he says now about that. So I'd like for him to come out and say again, yeah, I think that this should be investigated. So I mean, it would be nice for him to say to be consistent with the things he said in 2020. And I think that would help him ingratiate himself to some of the conservatives who are sitting there saying, well, at least he's trying to be objective and unbiased in his situation. But I'll tell you, let me put it this way. You know, Nick, you brought up Biden or Jeffries. Let's bring up AOC. It could have been AOC. I'd rather have Hakeem Jeffries than AOC. I mean, I'd rather have Hakeem Jeffries than Ilhan Omar. I'd rather have Hakeem Jeffries than, I mean, there's a lot of people I'd rather have Hakeem Jeffries over. So I'm thinking that by putting him up there, he's a young guy. He can learn from this experience. Maybe, you know, we'll get somewhere closer. Now I get it, Shaquille. The guy is just he's progressive, and he's a real progressive. So. You know, but
you just said AOC. I don't think progressive with AOC in the squad.
Be the next Democrat leader of the Senate. Is it going to be Fetterman? I mean, you might as well, because he can't get too much damage. This is terrible. Seriously.
Yeah, it's still going to be Chuck Schumer.
Because I meant to bring this up at the beginning of the week, and I haven't.
Could be Manchin.
We here in Australia, for those of you that are interested in politics outside of the United States. We in Australia have had 9 years of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party is the conservative side of politics. It's the Australian version of the Republican Party. And we have, in the last election cycle, we had a very, very conservative Prime Minister called Scott Morrison. Scott Morrison is an evangelical Christian. I will tell you, I voted for him both times that he ran. But during COVID, most Australians were very unhappy with how he handled things. And we also felt that he was being a bit arrogant. And he then had an absolutely landslide defeat against the Labor Party in the last election. and actually lost blue ribbon seats for the Liberal Party, seats that you would it'd be like LA County voting for the Republicans, like stuff that just doesn't happen. So this was a great shock. Now, one of the things that's come out since he is no longer the Prime Minister is that he appointed himself the minister in charge of a great many cabinets. That's not supposed to happen. And what he did was he went behind Parliament's back. He went underneath, in my opinion, usurped Parliament altogether and have the Governor-General sign off on that. And he claims, and continues to claim, that he did that because of the emergency situation that was caused by COVID. Most Australians don't agree with that, and he was unsuccessful earlier this week in defending himself against the censure motion. And I totally believe that he should be censured. And again, Mark, I'm not speaking on you, but for progressives out there and people that claim not to be progressives and think that they're moderates but can't criticize their own party, I personally absolutely 100% agree that he should be censured and he did the wrong thing. And I think for American politicians and American politics and those people that pay attention to it and people that pay attention to politics in their own countries, if you can't call out the people who you might like, who you might support, whose policies you might support, if you can't call them out when they've done something wrong, it's not just politicians that are the problem, it's you.
Well, a couple of things since you brought me up into the conversation. And I know you're ready to wind down, so I'm going to toss it back to you, Steve, and make it very succinct as Mark Lee can make it and everything. A couple of things in that space. One, it sounds like you have had a president that has declared himself or a ruling person emperor, because that definitely sounds like an emperor if you're going to be adding yourself to all kinds of different jobs and all in that space and everything. And I was loving that conversation. And so Republicans that are really conservatives that are really Republicans, and like that's how we in America look at it. And you wonder why Americans get a little confused when they hear about politics and they're going like, are they liberal? Are they conservative? Are they conservative? Are they liberal? Which one are they? Well, I get the narration, but I'm saying from an outsider looking in, Mark, it also gets confusing.
I can simplify that for you very, very easily. The people who believe in liberty outside of the United States are often called liberals. Within the United States, liberals are considered to be the people that want to use government power to oppress the free desires of other citizens.
That's a very narrow-minded definition of liberals and conservatives, even in the United States and everything, because I would never agree with that definition, like that variation of your revisionist history and everything. But definitely, I would not agree with that.
Lee,
and then Steve, I have called out folks. I've called out Obama on the drones. I've called out other folks. So I have no problem with calling out people. And I also have an issue.
The drones isn't about left-right politics.
On Monday and everything, which is I also don't like being told that I have to be told who my leaders are, because that is another conversation that's going on in the African-American community.
But you have no problems with telling me who I should support. Brilliant. I'll take myself off before you respond.
So real quickly, guys, it's been a great show. I want to thank all of you for being with us. Next week, we'll be talking a little bit about Moore versus Harper, a case in the United States Supreme Court is being argued in oral arguments. This is about the independent legislative theory and whether the states can actually draw maps, the legislatures, without court approval. And there's other factors that would affect future elections and the makeup of the Congress and the Senate. This case was brought by North Carolina Speaker of the House, Tim Moore, which is why it's named Moore versus Harper. We also want to get back to getting guests on the show. We are going to be bringing in Congressman Riley Nickel after he's sworn in next week, and other Congress leaders to talk about the new Congress, Deborah Ross and others. I'm reaching out, and we're going to get back to getting guests on. Been busy with the holiday season. Be safe wherever you are. May the light and love of our hearts always lift us out of darkness. Thank you so much. See you on Monday.
Can we get out of here?